In 2007, when I launched Hip Hop 2020, it was done in the spirit of advancing the ways in which hip hop's pedagogical performance is used to enhance the social justice literacies of youth influencers, but doing so through hip hop's practice of schooling and its language of schooling that is inherent in its text and in its participation aesthetics. A primary lesson of hip hop is that it is a remixed version of the blues aesthetic. I teach that with my students. We began looking at hip hop music through the text of Leroy Jones's Blues People. But more nuanced in hip hop than in other African American performance practices is this trope of schooling in hip hop. It categorizes itself around schools, around classes of MCs. There's this language of schooling that's associated with it. And so when interacting with the hip hop ecosystem, good, bad, or indifferent, the idea is to learn something when we step into a hip hop space or listen to hip hop music or integrate some sort of hip hop sensibility in the ways in which we live our lives. So this was the spirit guiding the development of the field when I began incubating Hip Hop 2020 at Morehouse College in 2007. The field was simply a toddler at the time. In order for the field to get the attention it needed to build a pipeline of scholars who wouldn't have to make some of the same sacrifices that some of the early scholars were making, I believe we needed evidence that hip hop as pedagogy worked, particularly during that time. It was, if you're thinking about early 2000s and you're looking at the brand of hip hop, just rap music, in 2003, Southern hip hop is at an all-time high, particularly crunk music, the snap music movement is moving, and people are really questioning what's happening with rap music. Nas said that during that time the hip hop was dead. So during that time, there was a lot of brand work that was having to be done around the actual use of hip hop in a classroom space, because to the broader world, it was violent, it was excessively material, it degraded women, that was all that it was. So in order to really push the field, we had to do a lot of brand work. So I took a non-traditional route into the profession, didn't go a tenure track route immediately, had the opportunity to use Morehouse as a lab space to really incubate the work. So I took an adjunct position and later on took a fellowship that would allow us to develop a space to really show evidence that this was actually a valuable field. So questions like how would we design content and disseminate this content, such as the intersections of hip hop as a technology of education, or hip hop as a technology of interpretation, hip hop as a technology of representation. How would this get illuminated in the classroom and outside the classroom? These were the questions that were really driving this project. So I started asking things about courses. Courses needed to be designed. So the physical space for hosting activities, for workshops, for class conversations and discussions, these are all around the production of content. For me, at the beginning, there was a course called The Black Aesthetic, which was an African American studies course that connected hip hop to a larger aesthetic of Black production. But hip hop is a public act of pedagogy. So the next design question led us to the hosting of a student-led conference called What is Hip Hop Studies? To open it up to the Morehouse and AUC community around what it actually meant for hip hop culture to be a conversation happening in the classrooms and on an HBCU campus at the time. So you have to keep in mind also during this time, Twitter was kind of beginning, Facebook was kind of getting off a little bit, but Instagram wasn't even out at the time. So the only platform that we felt like we could host the videos and the content that we were developing was going to be on a website, and we didn't have a website at the time. So one of the students that was in the class at the time, Ahmad Barber, who is now a partner on the project, decided to build a Wix site. Wix at the time was the only platform that, in a cheap way, in a very inexpensive way, could host a lot of HTML and could host a lot of Flash. That was Wix's marketing strategy. So this site here was the first iteration of what we did and what we built. And I was going to show it to you online, but I can't really put it up right now. This was our first site. We really didn't know what we were doing. We started off, what you're seeing here really started off as a discussion. We wanted to open up the conversations for online discussions. So I guess when we first started out, we were a digital publishing platform for students to write down and engage when we were not in class. So many of those conversations that students were having in class, they were also having them outside of class with students. They were excited about it. So the next question was, well, why don't we figure out a way to open this up to a more public audience, not just the classroom, not just the student campus, but really just opening it up to anybody who wants to be involved in that. And this is when we started something called 30 Days Of. And the first one was 30 Days of Kanye. We started it February 1st, 2011, and it was an empowerment series that was really beginning to look at hip hop through these 7 Ma'atic principles, these Africanisms. We wanted to look at the ways in which lyrics could be coded for truth. They could be coded for principles of reciprocity. They could be coded for principles of justice and balance. So this 30 Days of hip hop that started off as, we did the first one was 30 Days of Kanye, the second one was 30 Days of Nicki Minaj, and then we did 30 Days of Lauryn Hill, we did 30 Days of Watch the Throne. It was a different empowerment series for a year, posting at 7 a.m. every morning with text that went out to a much bigger constant contact list. And when we did 30 Days of Outkast, something happened. I realized that Outkast really had a hidden activism that could inform a contemporary hermeneutic or code for use in the classroom, particularly when it came to the way in which I wanted students to code for justice. So we took the operating under the crooked American system too long, that's in TRUDAT, and we turned it into, paired those, the principles that we were finding throughout the empowerment series, and came up with 7 new principles that borrow from the Africanisms of Ma'at, that borrow from these universal principles of just becoming, and we turned it into an acronym. And we've been using this rubric for everything that we do, designing the site, the way that we want the site to look, any type of digital design issue, we thread it through. Does it have these 7 principles in here? But more than anything, these are 7 principles that we're using with actual students when we're doing social justice pedagogy. So I use these principles in my class that I teach now. I teach a history of hip hop class. Last semester I taught an Outkast class. And whenever students are analyzing text, whether it's video, any type of artifact, we're using this particular hermeneutic to interpret that text. So O is for open-mindedness, U is for uprightness. We code for truth, we code for kinship, we code for accountability, we code for sequence, and then finally that final T is we're coding for teach love. So last week the students in class, for instance, they watched Juice. Well, they looked at Juice in a very different way using these particular principles to have much larger conversations around social justice. And I was really amazed last night when I was looking at their discussion questions that are posted in Canvas, trying to figure out a way to figure out how to get their stuff posted onto the site or archived into the site through the Institute. But one of the students talked about how that particular movie really reminded him of the juice and the power that's associated with police officers, and particularly when it came to the tragic incident on campus with Scout Schultz. So he was able to take this movie and apply it to himself using these principles to understand something that happened 2 weeks ago in his world. So those are the types of things that we've been doing through the project. How much time do I have?
About 2 minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so in 2012, we acquired an extensive vinyl collection from this DJ here, Mike Webster. And once we acquired that collection, it really took Hip Hop 2020 to another level. Actually, it opened up an opportunity for us to establish ourselves as an incubator, as a digital pedagogies incubator that focused on designing projects that didn't necessarily have to have anything to do with hip hop, but could have everything to do with cultural production. So then Hip Hop 2020 becomes one of our projects. So Mike Webster is a DJ from Atlanta, and when we got his collection, the idea was to use this one small room at the very bottom as a model to carve out an extended archive. So again, this is another way in which Outcast as a concept really guided our decisions when we did this. When we initially got this project, I was at a university that is remotely located. So the question was, how do students of color who can't get to these universities, who don't have the privilege to be able to get to a Morehouse or get to a Georgia Tech or get to any of these universities, how do they access this information and be able to experience it? And the only way that we thought was to make it digital. So we began to manipulate, use a Faro scanner. We went in, we scanned that entire room. If you look at that room, you will notice that in the video, that it is a replication, almost an exact replication of what you're seeing in that physical video. We had these artifacts here. That's a autograph of Grandmaster Flash on the back of a paper plate that he had in the room. And we used that room to model out 4 different rooms. So this is the schematic of what you just saw in the video, and I'll show just a little bit of that before I wrap up, and then answer any other questions. So again, this is what you were just seeing. Hopefully I've given you context for how to understand it. The reason why the albums are sitting up rather than how they would in a physical space is so that you can get access to them. So we have an oral history that we did with the donor that we've embedded into this television. And then shortly thereafter, we took one of the closet doors in the room and we turned that room into the Hip Hop 2020 room. So in this room, we have archived many of the things that we were doing at Morehouse and before around the integration of hip hop pedagogy and using it as a tool. So this is just some of the art, some of the music that's in the archive. If you notice, there's a 30 Days of Kanye poster that's over there. There's video of when Kid Cudi came to campus. All those things have been kind of archived in that room. I'm gonna speed up if I can get this to, right, okay. And then you go into this third room and we're modeling this out to be a classroom. Right now there's just video in there. We're still modeling out the resources that are going to be in the classroom, but I think one of the main issues, or one of the main things that I'm really interested in is what we're doing in this gallery. So a couple of years ago, I wrote a story for The Root called 8 Old School Records That You Need to Teach Your Students, or something like that. And we took that, so we put the Outcast imagination in the room, but we took the 8 songs and turned them into these nodes here. Let me speed up. To model out that actual blog post as information nodes. So what you'll see on here is we took all 8 of those songs, but the question was, okay, what happens when you take one song that's been curated for those social justice principles, those Outcast principles, and you pair it with another song? What are their social justice relationships? And so in a workshop a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a few students who actually did that work for us. They annotated I Can, they annotated the message according to those tags, and they pulled out the lyrics and showed where the shared social justice tags are located. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm sure we'll probably have some questions, but the whole idea is to build this out as a resource for not only teachers, but also students, music enthusiasts, people who just like music, and really figuring out ways to have it where you can actually control and produce your own content and your own bins using some of the tools that we have. We're working on our API right now, so I'll answer some of those technical questions. If you're interested in back-end stuff, I can answer those questions either during the Q&A or I can answer them afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, well, the last thing to be said, I think, is that What we hope you see is that the use of digital tools is just that. They are digital tools that are enabling some very different ways of thinking about what it means to do work in the humanities. It's about culture, it's about community, it's about dismantling boundaries, including, as in this last case, stretching the boundaries of what even constitutes a credible subject matter. It's about remixing, it's about scope, but it's also about critical conversations and critical, the interactive critique that goes along with this, that doesn't have what we're doing sitting within just an exclusively academic territory. So it's image and sound and intertextuality. It's a different kind of sense making.